They say a good story can ruin your life. I've seen it happen more than once. A reporter digs too deep. A politician gets nervous and suddenly the journalist vanishes as if swallowed by the city itself. Most people forget in a week. I don't. Because sometimes those stories knock on my office door, begging for someone to care. That's how it started on a rainy Tuesday night. The neon sign from the bar across the street flickered through my blinds, cutting my office into stripes of red and shadow. I had just crushed out a cigarette when the door opened. She stepped in, soaked from the storm, eyes rimmed with fatigue. She clutched a dripping umbrella like a weapon, though her hands shook too much to swing it. "Are you Harry?" she asked, her voice fragile. "That's me," I said. "Come in, sit." Her name was Elena. She placed a photograph on my desk, a man with sharp eyes behind thin glasses, a half-smile that looked more like defiance than joy. "My brother, Andriy," she whispered. "He's gone." I'd heard the name. Andriy, the journalist. The one who wrote about dirty contracts, backroom deals, and politicians who got rich while the rest of the city sank into mud. The kind of man who made enemies every time his byline hit the page. "When did you last see him?" I asked. 3 days ago. He went out for an interview and never came home. His phone's dead. His editor hasn't heard from him either. 3 days. That's when hope starts to turn into dread. I leaned back, weighing her words. Did he ever mention threats? Her laugh was short, bitter. Constantly. He said it came with the job. But lately, he was different. He said he was working on something huge, something that could blow the roof off this city. I frowned. Any idea what he meant? She hesitated, then opened her bag and pulled out a worn notebook. This was in his apartment. I thought it might help. The pages were crammed with tight handwriting, phone numbers, scraps of conversations. But one word leapt at me, Global Stroy, circled twice in red ink. That name rang like a gunshot. Global Stroy was a construction empire with roots sunk deep into City Hall. Whispers of bribery, shady land deals, even missing workers. But nothing ever stuck. Too many powerful friends. If Andriy had proof against them, he wasn't just writing a story. He was digging his own grave. I closed the notebook, feeling the weight of it. "Why not the police?" I asked. Her lips tightened. "They said he probably left on his own, that he was burned out. But I know my brother. He wouldn't walk away, not when he was this close." She was right. Reporters like Andriy didn't disappear for a vacation. They disappeared because someone wanted them silent. I looked at her, tired, desperate, but burning with conviction. She didn't want consolation. She wanted action. "All right," I said. "I'll take the case. But you need to understand something. If your brother really had the goods on Global Stroy, then whoever took him won't hesitate to come after anyone asking questions, including me." Elena's eyes didn't waver. "Then ask the right questions fast, Mr. Harry, before it's too late." The rain hammered harder against the glass, drowning out the city's noise. I lit another cigarette, the flame trembling in the draft. I didn't know it then, but this wasn't just another missing person. It was the kind of case that gets detectives buried right next to their clients. And if I was right about Global Stroy, I was already in too deep. Because here's the truth. When a journalist disappears in this city, it's never an accident. The next morning, I headed straight for the newsroom where Andriy worked. Newspapers are noisy places. Phones ringing, keyboards clattering, voices overlapping. But this one felt different, quieter, nervous. The kind of silence you get when people are pretending everything's fine, but everyone knows something's wrong. The receptionist gave me a once-over. "Press?" "Private," I said, flashing my card. "Looking into Andriy's disappearance." Her expression flickered, almost relieved. like someone finally admitted the elephant in the room. She pointed me toward a row of desks near the back. Andriy's space looked like a war zone of notes, drafts, and empty coffee cups. His computer was shut down, locked behind a password I couldn't guess. But the stack of papers scattered across his desk told its own story. A man in a wrinkled shirt approached, tie loosened like he'd been up all night. "You must be the detective his sister hired," he said. "I'm Pavlo, editor-in-chief." His handshake was weak, sweaty. "Look, we're all worried, but you know how it is with reporters. Sometimes they vanish for a few days, chasing a lead." "Without his phone?" I asked. Pavlo shifted uneasily. Andriy wasn't the type to play it safe. He thought he was invincible. Maybe this time. He let the sentence hang in the air. I sifted through the pile of drafts on the desk. Most were routine pieces. Corruption scandals, bribery allegations, nothing shocking. But wedged between them was a file with the same name I'd seen in the notebook, Global Stroy. A working headline read, "The company that owns the city." "Was he close to publishing this?" I asked. Pavlo hesitated, then leaned closer. Closer than he realized. He said, I caught the edge in his voice. Fear wrapped in resignation. Pavlo wanted the story out, but not if it cost him his life. Another journalist, a younger guy with sharp cheekbones, slid into the conversation. "Andriy told me Global Stroy had people inside City Hall. Said they could make problems disappear. Literally. You think they disappeared him?" Nobody laughed. Nobody even blinked. That kind of silence is louder than words. Before leaving, I checked the bulletin board by Andriy's desk. A series of phone numbers pinned there matched the ones in his notebook. But there was also a new addition. A business card with a name I recognized. Deputy Mayor Sergei Ritsenko. If Andriy had been in contact with him, then the story reached higher than I'd thought. I slipped the card into my pocket and thanked the staff. Pavlo's final words followed me to the door. "Harry, if you find him, alive or dead, you better be careful. We print stories. You're going to be living in one." Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and reflective. I lit a cigarette, leaning against the brick wall, flipping through my notes. The pieces were starting to form a picture, but it was ugly, and I wasn't sure I wanted to see the whole canvas. That's when I noticed him. Across the street, leaning against a lamppost, a man in a dark coat watched me. Not reading a paper, not checking his phone, just watching. Our eyes met for a second, and he turned away, disappearing into the crowd. Coincidence? Maybe. But I've lived too long in this business to believe in coincidences. I ground out the cigarette and started walking. If Andriy had been right, Global Stroy had its hooks deep in the city. And now, whether I liked it or not, I'd just stepped into their spotlight. And trust me, being noticed by people like that is never a good thing. By the third day of a missing person case, the trail usually goes cold. But Andriy wasn't just anyone. He'd been digging into people who couldn't afford daylight. And that meant every scrap of his notes was worth chasing. The name Global Stroy was my first real lead. A construction empire with shiny billboards promising the future of the city. Behind the slogans, though, there were whispers. Crooked contracts, workers who fell from scaffolding, politicians suddenly flush with cash, the kind of empire built on concrete, steel, and silence. I started where every good scandal hides, public records. The city archive smelled of mold and bureaucracy. It took a bribe and 2 hours of pretending to be invisible, but eventually I found the pattern. Global Stroy had won 5 multi-million-dollar contracts in the past year, all approved by the same deputy mayor, Hertsenko, the name on that business card from Andrey's desk. Coincidence? Not a chance. But paper trails only tell part of the story. To get the rest, I needed someone on the inside. And thanks to Andrey's notebook, I had a number. I dialed it from a payphone outside a grocery store, rain dripping off the cracked plastic cover. A man's voice answered, low and nervous. "This line isn't safe. Who are you?" "Name's Harry. I'm looking for Andriy." Silence. Then, "He shouldn't have involved anyone else." "Too late. He's missing. If you know why, meet me. Tonight." We arranged to meet in an old cafe near the river. The kind of place where the wallpaper peels, the coffee tastes like rust, and nobody asks questions. I arrived early, sat in a corner booth with a clear view of the door. At 9 sharp he walked in, thin, pale, with eyes darting like a hunted animal. He ordered nothing, slid into the booth, and leaned close. "Andriy was close," he whispered. "He found proof. Bribes, offshore accounts, shell companies tied to Ritsenko. He had documents, photos, everything." "Where are they now?" I asked. "He hid them. He was going to publish this week. That's why they took him. Global Stroy doesn't threaten, they erase." The words sent a chill through me. If Andriy really had evidence, it wasn't just about corruption anymore. It was survival. "Do you know where they might keep him?" I pressed. The man shook his head, sweat glistening on his temple. "No, but he mentioned an old warehouse by the docks, said he was meeting a source there the night he disappeared." Before I could ask more, he froze, eyes fixed on the window. A black sedan had pulled up across the street. 2 men in dark coats stepped out. "Too late," he whispered. His chair scraped back violently. He bolted for the rear exit. I followed, but by the time I reached the alley, headlights flared. The sedan screeched around the corner, tires hissing on wet asphalt. The informant lay crumpled against the brick wall, his body twisted unnaturally. I knelt beside him. His chest still heaved, faint and shallow. "Where?" I demanded. "Where's Andriy?" He coughed, blood trickling from his lips. One word escaped before his eyes glazed over. "Warehouse." And then he was gone. The alley smelled of exhaust and iron. I stood there, fists clenched, the weight of another dead man pressing down on me. Someone had just sent me a message: "Stop digging." But if they thought killing a scared informant would scare me off, they didn't know me. I lit a cigarette with shaking hands and looked out toward the docks. The night was quiet, but I could already feel the storm coming. And I knew one thing: if I didn't find Andriy soon, I'd be the next body left cooling in an alley. The docks always smell of salt, rust, and secrets. By the time I got there, the rain had stopped, leaving puddles that shimmered like broken mirrors under the streetlights. The warehouse wasn't hard to find, an old corrugated metal beast, windows boarded, doors chained, the kind of place the city forgot, except when someone wanted it forgotten. I slipped inside through a side door that hung crooked on its hinges. My flashlight cut through the dark, catching dust swirling like smoke. The floor was littered with old crates and the husks of machines long dead. Every creak echoed too loudly, making me feel like the building itself was holding its breath. Then I saw it, drag marks across the dusty floor, fresh, heavy. Someone had moved something, or someone, recently. My pulse quickened. I followed the trail deeper into the shadows until I heard the sound. Footsteps. Not mine. I killed the flashlight, crouched behind a stack of crates, and listened. A voice broke the silence, low and mocking. "You must be Harry." The beam of a flashlight stabbed across the room, blinding me. I raised a hand, squinting. 3 men stepped out of the dark, suits under cheap coats, the kind of muscle you hire when intimidation matters more than brains. One of them held a length of pipe, tapping it against his palm. "You're poking around where you don't belong," he said. "Funny," I shot back, forcing calm. "I was about to say the same thing." They didn't laugh. The one with the pipe leaned closer, his shadow stretching long across the floor. "Walk away, detective. Forget the journalist, forget the company. Otherwise—" He let the pipe clang against the metal crate beside me, sparks jumping. I didn't move. "If he's dead, why bother warning me?" I asked. That got them. A flicker of irritation crossed his face. They wanted me scared, not thinking, which meant there was something to think about. "Last chance," he growled. "You back off, you live. Keep digging, you won't." They started to back out, but as they did, one of them dropped something, a scrap of paper fluttering to the floor. They didn't notice. I waited until their footsteps faded, then snatched it up. It was torn from a notepad, smudged and damp, but I could make out the words KM12 basement. It wasn't much, but it was something. And the way they tried to scare me off instead of just breaking my skull told me all I needed to know. Andriy was still alive. I stuffed the paper in my pocket and lit a cigarette, the flame shaking slightly in the draft. The night air bit cold as I stepped out of the warehouse. Whoever these men worked for, they'd made one mistake, letting me walk away. And now I had a direction. A basement, a chance. The hunt wasn't over. It was just getting started. The scrap of paper with KM12 basement burned a hole in my pocket all night. By morning, I traced it to an old storage unit near the outskirts, registered to a shell company that, surprise, tied back to Global Stroy. The place was quiet, too quiet. A rusted padlock gave way under my crowbar, and I stepped inside. Dust, mildew, silence. But beneath the smell of rot was something sharper. Fear. In the far corner sat a metal cabinet, locked but flimsy. 2 strikes with the crowbar and it gave. Inside, wrapped in plastic, was a laptop, a portable drive, and a folder thick with documents. My pulse jumped. I carried them back to my office before daring to open anything. The laptop booted slow, but once it did, I saw Andriy's work. Spreadsheets of bank transfers, photos of luxury villas bought under fake names, scanned contracts with Fritsenko's signature all over them. The kind of evidence that could take down a company and a government with it. But what hit hardest wasn't the corruption. It was a half-written email, still saved in his drafts. "If anything happens to me, they'll keep me in the cottage by the forest. Basement level. KM12 will tell you where to look." He knew. He saw it coming. I leaned back, smoke curling from the cigarette I'd lit without realizing. Andriy hadn't just been chasing a story. He'd been preparing for his own disappearance. The map coordinates in the draft pointed to a private estate outside the city, deep in the woods, a place no one would stumble onto by accident. I copied every file, every photo onto my own drive. If I went after him, I needed insurance. Evidence this explosive was worth killing for. And they already had. The weight of the flash drive in my pocket felt heavier than any gun. I poured myself a bitter coffee, staring out at the rain-soaked streets. I'd found the proof. Now I just needed the man who risked everything to gather it. And if he was still breathing, I was his only chance. The forest road ended in silence. At the coordinates from Andriy's draft, a sleek modern cottage rose among the trees, expensive, isolated, and far from curious eyes. The kind of place you'd never stumble across unless someone wanted you to. I left my car down the hill and approached on foot. Curtains were drawn, but light bled through the cracks. The basement door creaked as I eased it open. Damp concrete and rust hit my nose. Andriy sat chained to a metal chair. His face was bruised, his eyes hollow. But when he saw me, a spark returned. "Harry," he croaked. "Save it. We're leaving," I whispered. I was working the lock when footsteps pounded the stairs. 3 men stormed in, all dark coats and cold eyes. The same hired muscle I'd seen shadowing me before. The first swung a pipe. I ducked, slammed him against the wall. The second came at me with a knife. I twisted his wrist until the blade clattered away. The third raised a pistol, but I was faster. My shot cracked through the basement, leaving smoke and silence. The fight was quick, but brutal. When it was done, only groans remained. I freed Andriy, slung his arm over my shoulder, and together we slipped out into the trees. The night air never felt so sharp. Back in my office, Andriy hunched over the desk while I pulled the files from the drive. Contracts, transfers, photos. Enough evidence to crack Global Stroy wide open. Among them was proof of Deputy Mayor Hrytsenko's direct involvement. It was dynamite in digital form. Within 24 hours, his article went live. Headline bold: "The company that owns the city." Names, dates, bank accounts, undeniable truth. The reaction was immediate. The deputy mayor resigned under pressure, the police launched raids, and Global Stroy's polished empire started to crumble. Andriy survived, but the bruises would take time to fade. His thanks came quietly, but I didn't need it. Watching the city choke on the truth, that was enough. We sat as dawn crawled across the blinds, bitter coffee between us, smoke curling into the gray light. Outside, headlines shouted what Andriy had risked everything to write. "Think it'll change anything?" he asked, eyes tired but steady. I exhaled slow. "For a while, but men like them always crawl back. The real question is whether people remember or forget." He nodded, determination settling on his bruised face. "Then we'll keep reminding them." I lifted my cup in a toast to survival, to truth, and to the price they demand. Because in this city, truth doesn't set you free. It just makes you the biggest target in the room.